Hi, welcome to Barb's Kitchen Center. My name's Celeste and this is my test kitchen. Today we're going to make a pizza dough. And this is the nice thing about this pizza dough is you can keep it in the fridge for a very long time and it will last. You can freeze it for a little while, probably about 7 days, and then thaw it out and still use it. Or, as in what I did this morning, I had some people show up unexpectedly. I knew I had the pizza dough in the fridge from the skillet pizza class we did last night. So I cut it in half, made a baguette, and baked it, cut up the baguette, and served it with the salsas and pestos I made last night. So you can turn this pizza dough into a baguette in a pinch. So I'd also like to remind you that if you watch and like this video and send an email to Cassina, our social media lady, you can be entered into a draw to win this Le Creuset skillet for making steak, making your own skillet pizza, whatever you want. Le Creuset was kind enough to donate a skillet, and I'm doing one more class and this last video on pizza, and anybody who likes and watches it before the end of June 2022 will be entered into the draw. Thank you. All right, now on to pizza dough. So a couple things about pizza dough. You can use an all-purpose flour, which will give you a tender crust. If you want to use bread flour, you will have a crunchier crust. You can use water, and you don't want to add it all at once. You can use an oil-water mix. If you're using oil and water, and you want to add some spices to your pizza dough, you can add it to the oil and infuse the oil. Thanks, Emma. You can add, if you are using shortening, use a 50-50 blend of oil and shortening. And your mixing time will depend. I like to make this at least a day ahead of time, so I won't necessarily mix it for a long time. But the next time I stroll through the kitchen, I will pop the dough out of the bowl and knead it a little bit. And eventually in the next 24 hours, it will turn into a lovely, lovely dough. All right, so we're going to start with our flour. We're going to use 300 grams of all-purpose flour. Whenever you are doing something by weight, it is going to be more accurate than if you're doing it by cups. Because if you pack your cup, you can wind up with a substantially larger amount of flour than you had intended, which is okay if you know what the dough you're making is going to look like, because then you can add water to adjust. But if you're not sure, if this is the first time you're making it and the recipe gives you a weight, do it by weight. You'll find you'll have a better result with it. So we're getting close. We're at 263. If I sneezed on that, it would turn into 300. Come on. There we go. I won't sneeze on it. So 300 grams of flour, which is approximately 2.5 cups. I will put that into the slicer shredder bowl of my Bosch. And then I will add just a half teaspoon of salt. And, I'm going to put the lid on and I'm going to mix this up just a wee bit. Because I'm going to put my yeast in next, and I don't want the yeast to land directly on the salt. So I could put the salt in one side and the yeast in the other, but I've had the best luck by mixing the salt into the flour a little bit. So it calls for about 7 grams, which is a teaspoon and a bit, at least with this yeast that I'm using. And a little bit extra for good luck. So if you were I'm using what's called surprise yeast, which comes in a little package like this. You can get it here at our store. A little package like this is about $3, and it is 2 years freezer stable. So it will last you for 2 years in your freezer. So if you're somebody who doesn't make a lot of bread and you don't want to buy the 1-pound bricks, then go with something like that. You can use instant yeast, which would be a great answer to this, or bread machine yeast, which would work just fine. If you're using live yeast is going to have a stronger flavor. It'll work just as well, but make sure you use twice as much. If you're using a sourdough starter, you're going to want to use probably a good half cup, if not a little more, depending on how strong your sourdough starter is. And you should know that by how bubbly it is when you take it out and feed it. So, next I'm going to put my lid on my, and two, if you're using a sourdough starter, you're going to have to use more flour. And in that case, I would put my sourdough starter and then add the yeast and water as I go along. Or not the yeast, I'm sorry, the flour and the water as I go along. So what you're going to find out in the video in the next 2 weeks is that before I did this, I made pesto. So we do some of these videos, many of them all on the same day, which is why my clothes never change from week to week. It's certainly not because I have a lack of clothing. Trust me, ask anybody who knows me. So instead of washing out my pesto bowl, I put my water in here, and there's a little bit of oil left over from making the pesto and that really good garlicky taste, and the pesto we made had cilantro in it. So I'm actually going to put this in this dough. It'll give the dough a little bit of extra flavor. And so with this dough, I will make the pizza that only I like, and that is a pesto, potato, and onion and bacon pizza. So. Okay, the water's all incorporated. I'm going to let it mix for about 2.5 to 3 minutes. All right. The dough has come together, but it still looks pretty raggedy, and that's okay. As you let it sit and rest, and it will come together into a really, really nice dough. So at this point, you don't want to, the temptation is to put some flour on a board, and you don't really want to do that because then your glutens won't all develop at the same time. So what I generally do is I'll use a pan spray or even a little olive oil, and I will put it on the board, and then I will spray my hands because dough will stick to dough, so I want to try and make my hands not an attractive medium for more dough to stick to it. So I will just leave this to rest for 20 minutes or at least 20 minutes, a minimum of 20 minutes. I'll work it again. It'll form a nice round smooth ball of dough, and probably tomorrow for lunch I'll make pizza.